Prince Junior walked through the grand halls of the palace every morning at exactly 8 o'clock. This had been his routine since he turned 16 3 months ago. Unlike other royal children who spent their mornings with private tutors or sleeping late, Junior preferred to explore different parts of the palace grounds. His father, King Alexander, encouraged these walks. "A future king must know every corner of his kingdom," the king often said. "Start with your own home." So Junior made it his mission to visit a different section of the palace each day, observing the staff, learning their names, and understanding how the royal household truly functioned. On this particular Tuesday morning, Junior decided to visit the East Wing, where the palace security headquarters was located. He had never spent much time in this area before. The corridors here were different from the decorated halls he knew so well. The walls were plain white, the floors were simple tiles, and everything felt more serious and businesslike. As he approached the security office, Junior could hear voices coming from inside. The door was slightly open, and he could see several guards in their dark blue uniforms gathered around a large desk. Maps and schedules were spread across the surface, and the guards looked tired. Junior noticed that some of them had been working since the previous evening. Captain Rodriguez, the head of palace security, was speaking to his team. "We need to double-check all entry points before the diplomatic meeting next week," he said, pointing to different locations on the palace blueprint. "The ambassador from neighboring kingdoms will be arriving, and security cannot have any gaps." Junior stepped closer to the doorway, careful not to interrupt. He had always been curious about how security worked, but this was his first time seeing the actual planning process. The guards looked stressed, and Junior could see why. The amount of coordination required to keep the palace safe was enormous. One of the younger guards, Thomas, raised his hand hesitantly. "Captain, what about the North Garden entrance? Should we station someone there permanently?" Captain Rodriguez looked at the map again, studying it carefully. "Yes, good point. We'll need someone there during all visiting hours." Junior watched as the guards continued their planning session. He noticed how carefully they considered every possible scenario, every entrance, every potential security risk. These men and women worked around the clock to ensure his family's safety. Yet he had never really thought about the complexity of their job before. As the meeting continued, Junior realized he was learning more about palace operations in these few minutes than he had in months of formal lessons. His tutors had taught him about diplomatic protocol and royal etiquette, but they had never explained the detailed work that happened behind the scenes to make royal events possible. The guards began discussing shift schedules, and Junior could see the challenge they faced. With limited staff and round-the-clock security needs, many guards were working double shifts. Some had been on duty for over 12 hours, and fatigue was beginning to show on their faces. Captain Rodriguez dismissed the meeting, and the guards began to file out of the room. Junior stepped back from the doorway, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. As the guards passed by him in the corridor, they respectfully nodded and said, "Good morning, Your Highness." But Junior could see the exhaustion in their eyes. After the guards had gone, Junior remained in the corridor thinking about what he had witnessed. For the first time, he truly understood that being royalty meant that dozens of people worked tirelessly behind the scenes to maintain his family's lifestyle and safety. These guards sacrificed their own comfort and time with their families to serve the royal household. Junior decided to continue his walk through the East Wing. He wanted to see more of how the security department operated on a daily basis. As he walked down the corridor, he passed several small offices where individual guards were completing paperwork, reviewing surveillance footage, and coordinating with other departments. In one office, he saw Guard Martinez reviewing footage from the previous night. The guard looked tired but remained focused on his task, carefully watching the screen for any unusual activity. In another office, Guard Williams was updating the duty roster, trying to ensure that all posts would be covered despite having 3 guards out sick. Junior began to understand that palace security was not just about standing at doors and checking identification. It involved constant planning, coordination, and attention to detail. Every event, every visitor, every change in routine required careful consideration and preparation. As he completed his walk through the East Wing, Junior felt a new sense of responsibility. He realized that his actions and decisions as a prince affected not just himself, but all the people who worked to support the royal household. The guards, the staff, the servants. They all depended on the royal family to make thoughtful decisions that would make their jobs manageable and meaningful. Walking back toward the main palace, Junior decided that tomorrow he would return to the security wing. But next time, instead of just observing, he would introduce himself properly to the guards and learn more about their individual experiences and challenges. He wanted to understand not just how security worked, but how he could be a better prince to the people who served his family so faithfully. The next morning, Junior returned to the East Wing earlier than usual. He arrived at 7:30, hoping to see how the security team started their day. As he approached the security office, he noticed that the hallway was quieter than yesterday. Most of the guards were already at their assigned posts throughout the palace. Inside the main security office, Junior saw guard Thomas sitting alone at a desk, staring at a computer screen. The young guard looked even more tired than he had the day before. His uniform was perfectly pressed, but his eyes were red and his shoulders seemed heavy with exhaustion. Junior knocked gently on the open door. "Good morning, Thomas," he said, remembering the guard's name from yesterday's meeting. Thomas immediately stood up and saluted. "Good morning, Your Highness. I didn't expect to see you here so early. Please sit down," Junior said, entering the office. "I've been trying to learn more about how security works here. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" Thomas looked surprised but nodded respectfully. "Of course, Your Highness. Though I'm not sure how much help I can be. I'm still quite new to this position." Junior pulled up a chair beside Thomas's desk. "How long have you been working here?" he asked. Thomas hesitated for a moment before answering. "About 8 months, sir. I started right after I finished my military training." Junior could see that Thomas was nervous, but he seemed honest and willing to talk. "What's your typical day like?" Junior continued. Thomas looked at his computer screen, then back at the prince. "Well, it varies depending on the shift assignment. Sometimes I'm stationed at the main entrance checking visitor credentials. Other times I patrol the gardens or monitor the security cameras. Today I'm supposed to be reviewing yesterday's incident reports and updating the visitor logs." As Thomas spoke, Junior noticed that the guard kept glancing at his watch and seemed distracted. "Is everything all right?" Junior asked. "You seem worried about something." Thomas looked uncomfortable, as if he wasn't sure whether he should share his concerns with a member of the royal family. "It's nothing serious, Your Highness," Thomas said carefully. "Just some personal matters that I need to take care of." But Junior could see that whatever was troubling Thomas was more than just a minor personal issue. The guard's hands were shaking slightly, and he kept looking toward the door as if he was expecting bad news. Junior decided to be more direct. "Thomas, I know we don't know each other well, but if there's something affecting your work or your well-being, maybe I can help. My father always says that we're only as strong as the people who serve alongside us." Thomas looked surprised by the prince's genuine concern. After a long pause, Thomas finally spoke. "Your Highness, my mother has been very sick. She lives in the village about 2 hours from here, and she's been in the hospital for the past week. The doctors say she needs surgery, but—" Thomas stopped, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't burden you with my family problems. Please continue," Junior encouraged. "What about the surgery?" Thomas took a deep breath. "The surgery is expensive, and my mother doesn't have insurance that covers the full cost. I've been trying to work extra shifts to earn more money, but even with overtime pay, I don't have enough saved yet. The doctors say they can't wait much longer to perform the operation." Junior felt a knot form in his stomach. Here was a young man who served his family faithfully, yet he was struggling with a crisis that seemed impossible to solve on a guard's salary. "How much do you need for the surgery?" Junior asked. Thomas looked uncomfortable discussing money with the prince, but he answered honestly. "About $3,000, sir. I have about half of that saved, but I need the rest within the next 2 weeks." "Have you spoken to Captain Rodriguez about this?" Junior asked. Thomas shook his head. "I don't want to seem like I'm asking for special treatment or making excuses. Everyone here works hard, and many of the guards have their own family responsibilities. I don't want Captain Rodriguez to think I can't handle my job because of personal problems." Junior could see the impossible position Thomas was in. The young guard was trying to be professional and responsible, but he was also desperate to help his mother. The stress was clearly affecting his ability to focus on his work, yet he felt he couldn't ask for help without appearing weak or unreliable. "What about taking time off to be with your mother?" Junior asked. Thomas looked even more uncomfortable. I can't afford to take unpaid leave right now, Your Highness. I need every hour of work I can get to earn money for the surgery. Besides, we're already short-staffed because of the upcoming diplomatic visits. It wouldn't be fair to my colleagues to ask for time off when they're already working extra hours. Junior was beginning to understand the full scope of Thomas's dilemma. The guard was caught between his duty to his job and his duty to his family. He couldn't afford to take time off, but he also couldn't stop worrying about his mother long enough to focus properly on his security responsibilities. "When was the last time you went home to see her?" Junior asked. Thomas's voice became very quiet. "I haven't seen her since she went into the hospital. I've been working double shifts to try to earn extra money, and the hospital is too far away for me to visit between shifts. I call her every evening, but it's not the same as being there." Junior could see tears forming in Thomas's eyes, though the guard was trying hard to maintain his composure. This young man was sacrificing everything, his time, his rest, his peace of mind, to try to save his mother's life while still fulfilling his duties to the royal family. "Thomas," Junior said gently, "you're carrying a very heavy burden. No one should have to choose between taking care of family and doing their job well." Thomas nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he finally looked up at the prince, his expression was one of gratitude mixed with desperation. "I just don't know what else to do, Your Highness," Thomas admitted. "I've looked into loans, but my credit isn't good enough yet. I've asked family members for help, but everyone is struggling with their own expenses. I feel like I'm failing both my mother and my job, no matter how hard I try." Junior sat quietly for a moment, processing everything Thomas had shared. This was not just about one guard's personal problems. This was about how the palace treated the people who dedicated their lives to serving the royal family. Junior realized that he had never considered how financial emergencies affected the staff, or whether the palace had any systems in place to help employees during crises like this. Junior spent the rest of that morning thinking about his conversation with Thomas. He couldn't concentrate on his usual lessons with his tutors. During lunch, he barely touched his food, much to the concern of the palace staff who served him. His mind kept returning to the image of Thomas sitting alone in the security office, carrying such a heavy burden while trying to maintain his professional duties. After lunch, Junior decided to walk through the palace again, but this time he paid attention to details he had never noticed before. He looked at the faces of the guards, the housekeeping staff, and the kitchen workers. For the first time, he wondered about their lives outside the palace walls. Did they have families who needed them? Did they face financial struggles like Thomas? How many of them were working multiple shifts just to make ends meet? In the afternoon, Junior found Captain Rodriguez in his office reviewing security reports. The captain stood when the prince entered, but Junior immediately gestured for him to sit back down. "Captain Rodriguez, I'd like to ask you about the guards who work here. How well do you know their personal situations?" Captain Rodriguez looked puzzled by the question. "Well, Your Highness, I try to maintain professional relationships with all my staff. I know their work performance, their strengths and areas for improvement, their scheduling preferences. Is there something specific you're concerned about?" Junior chose his words carefully. "I've been wondering about their lives outside of work. Do you know if any of them face financial hardships or family emergencies that might affect their ability to do their jobs?" The captain thought for a moment. "Occasionally, guards will request schedule changes for family reasons, or they might ask to work extra shifts if they need additional income. But most of them don't share personal details unless it directly affects their work schedule." "What happens if a guard has a family emergency that requires time off or financial assistance?" Junior asked. Captain Rodriguez shifted in his chair, seeming uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Your Highness, we have standard policies for sick leave and emergency time off. Guards can use their vacation days for personal matters, and we try to be flexible with scheduling when possible. But beyond that, personal financial matters are generally considered outside the scope of employment." Junior realized that the palace, despite its wealth and resources, had no formal system for helping employees during personal crises. Guards like Thomas were expected to handle family emergencies on their own, even when those emergencies affected their ability to work effectively. "Captain, what would happen if a guard's personal problems began affecting their job performance?" Junior asked. Rodriguez sighed. "Well, we would have to address it through the normal disciplinary process. We might offer counseling or a performance improvement plan, but ultimately, If a guard cannot maintain professional standards, we would have to consider reassignment or termination. Junior felt a chill run down his spine. The palace system seemed designed to punish guards for having human problems, rather than supporting them through difficult times. A guard like Thomas could lose his job for being distracted by his mother's illness, even though his distraction came from his desperate desire to save her life. That evening, Junior joined his parents for dinner in the family dining room. King Alexander and Queen Isabella noticed that their son seemed unusually quiet and thoughtful. "How are your lessons today?" the Queen asked. "Professor Martinez said you seemed distracted during your economics tutorial." Junior looked up from his plate. "Father, Mother, I wanted to ask you about the people who work for us here at the palace. How much do we know about their personal lives and challenges?" King Alexander set down his fork and looked at his son with interest. "That's an unusual question, Junior. What prompted you to think about this?" Junior decided to share what he had learned about Thomas without mentioning the guard by name. He explained about the conversation he had witnessed in the security office, and his growing realization that many palace employees might be struggling with personal problems while trying to maintain their professional duties. Queen Isabella listened carefully as Junior spoke. When he finished, she nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Junior, when I was growing up, my grandmother always said that true leadership meant taking care of the people who take care of you. I wonder if we've lost sight of that principle in our focus on protocol and efficiency." King Alexander agreed. "The palace employs over 200 people, and we've always prided ourselves on offering competitive salaries and benefits. But you're right to point out that salary alone might not be enough when someone faces a true emergency." The king paused, considering his words. "What do you think we should do about this?" Junior had been hoping his parents would ask that question. "I think we need to learn more about what our employees actually face in their daily lives. Maybe we could create some kind of emergency assistance program, or at least make it easier for people to get help when they need it without fear of losing their jobs." Queen Isabella smiled at her son. "I'm proud of you for thinking about this, Junior. It shows the kind of king you're going to become." But then her expression grew more serious. "However, we need to be careful about how we approach this. We can't simply start giving money to employees who ask for it, or we could create bigger problems. We need to think through this systematically." King Alexander nodded in agreement. "Your mother is right. If we're going to help our employees more effectively, we need to create fair policies that everyone can understand and rely on. We also need to make sure we're not interfering inappropriately in people's private lives." Junior understood his parents' concerns, but he also felt a sense of urgency about Thomas's situation. "What if we started by just learning more about what people need? Could we do some kind of survey or hold meetings where employees could share their thoughts without fear of consequences?" "That's a good starting point," the king agreed. "But first, I think you should spend more time observing and talking to different employees. Learn about their perspectives and challenges before we start making changes to palace policies," the queen added. "And be careful not to make promises or create expectations that we might not be able to fulfill." Junior felt both encouraged and frustrated by his parents' response. He was glad they were taking his concerns seriously, but he worried that by the time they developed new policies, it might be too late to help Thomas's mother. He realized he would need to find a way to balance his desire to help immediately with the need to create lasting changes that would benefit all palace employees. After dinner, Junior walked through the palace corridors again, but this time he felt a different kind of responsibility. He was no longer just a prince learning about his future kingdom. He was someone who had seen a glimpse of the struggles faced by the people who served his family, and he felt obligated to do something meaningful about it. As he passed the security office, Junior saw that the lights were still on. Through the window, he could see Thomas working late again, probably trying to earn overtime pay for his mother's surgery. The sight strengthened Junior's resolve to find a way to help, not just Thomas but all the palace employees who might be facing similar challenges in silence. Junior couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he thought about Thomas sitting alone in the security office, working late hours while worrying about his mother. By 3 a.m, Junior had made a decision. He couldn't wait for policy changes that might take months to implement. Thomas's mother needed surgery within 2 weeks, and Junior had the power to help immediately. The next morning, Junior skipped his regular breakfast and went straight to his personal study. He opened his private bank account on his computer and checked his balance. As a prince, he received a monthly allowance that was more than generous. He had been saving most of it, planning to use it eventually for personal interests and hobbies. Looking at the numbers on his screen, Junior realized he had more than enough to cover Thomas's mother's surgery costs. However, Junior knew he couldn't simply hand Thomas the money directly. That would put the guard in an impossible position, and might even get him in trouble with his supervisors. Junior needed to find a way to help that would preserve Thomas's dignity and avoid creating complications with palace employment policies. After thinking for an hour, Junior had an idea. He would create an anonymous employee emergency fund and make Thomas the first recipient. This way, it wouldn't appear that the prince was giving personal charity to one specific employee. Instead, it would look like the palace was implementing a new program to help staff during crises. Junior wrote a detailed proposal for the emergency fund, outlining how it would work and what kinds of situations it would address. He included guidelines for applications, approval processes, and repayment options for employees who could afford to pay back assistance over time. The proposal was thorough enough to serve as the foundation for a real palace policy, even though Junior was creating it primarily to help Thomas. At 10 o'clock, Junior went to his father's office. King Alexander was reviewing trade agreements with his economic advisors, but he dismissed them when his son asked to speak privately. "Father, I've been thinking more about what we discussed last night." Junior began, handing the king his written proposal. "I think I've found a way to help our employees immediately while also creating a long-term solution." King Alexander read through the proposal carefully, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow. When he finished, he looked at his son with a mixture of pride and concern. "This is very thoughtful, Junior. You've clearly put a lot of effort into thinking through the details, but implementing something like this will require careful consideration and legal review. It could take several weeks to put this into place properly. What if we started with a pilot program?" Junior suggested. "We could select 1 or 2 employees who are currently facing emergencies and use their situations to test how the fund would work in practice. That way, we could help people immediately while also learning how to improve the system before we implement it palace-wide." The king studied his son's face carefully. "Junior, is there a specific employee you have in mind for this pilot program?" Junior felt his cheeks redden slightly, but he met his father's gaze directly. "There might be," he admitted. "But I think any assistance should go through proper channels, not because of personal relationships or favoritism." King Alexander smiled. "I see. Well, if we're going to do a pilot program, we'll need Captain Rodriguez to identify employees who might benefit from emergency assistance. We can't have you selecting recipients based on conversations you've had during your morning walks." Junior felt relieved. His father was finding a way to help Thomas while maintaining proper procedures. "I'll call Captain Rodriguez and explain that we're considering an employee emergency assistance program," the king continued. "I'll ask him to confidentially identify any guards who are currently facing financial hardships that might affect their work performance. If he mentions the guard you're thinking of, we'll know the need is legitimate and not just based on your personal impression." Within an hour, Captain Rodriguez was in the king's office. King Alexander explained the concept of an emergency assistance fund and asked the captain to identify any employees who might be good candidates for a pilot program. Rodriguez immediately thought of Thomas. "Your Majesty, there is one guard who I believe is struggling with family medical expenses. I've noticed that he's been working excessive overtime and seems constantly worried about something outside of work. Tell me about this guard's situation," the king requested. Rodriguez explained what he knew about Thomas's mother's illness and the financial pressure the young guard was facing. "He hasn't asked for help directly," Rodriguez added, "but I can see that the stress is affecting his ability to concentrate on his duties. I've been concerned about it, but I wasn't sure what the palace could do to assist with personal family matters." King Alexander looked at Junior, who was trying to hide his satisfaction that Thomas had been identified independently. "Captain Rodriguez, if we had an emergency assistance fund available, do you think this guard would be an appropriate recipient?" Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely, Your Majesty. He's a dedicated employee who's only struggling because of circumstances beyond his control. If we could help him through this crisis, I believe he would continue to be an excellent guard for many years." "Very well," the king decided. I'm authorizing an emergency assistance fund pilot program. Junior, your proposal will serve as the foundation, but we'll implement it through Captain Rodriguez to maintain proper chain of command. The king turned to Rodriguez. Captain, you'll oversee the application and approval process. The fund will provide up to $5,000 for qualifying emergencies, with flexible repayment terms based on the employee's financial situation. Junior felt a surge of excitement and relief. Not only would Thomas receive the help he needed, but the palace would have a new system in place to assist other employees facing similar crises. Rodriguez looked surprised but pleased. This is wonderful, Your Majesty. I think it will make a real difference in employee morale and performance. Should I speak with the guard about this immediately? Yes, King Alexander replied, but present it as a new palace program, not as assistance that was created specifically for his situation. We want him to feel that he's receiving help because he qualifies for a legitimate employee benefit, not because someone took pity on his personal circumstances. After Rodriguez left to speak with Thomas, Junior remained in his father's office. King Alexander looked at his son with obvious pride. You handled this very well, Junior. You saw a problem, developed a solution, and found a way to implement it that respects everyone involved. That's exactly the kind of leadership our kingdom needs. Junior felt proud of what they had accomplished, but he also felt a new sense of responsibility. Father, this is just the beginning, isn't it? If we're going to be good leaders, we need to keep looking for ways to support the people who serve our kingdom. King Alexander nodded. Exactly right. Real leadership isn't about giving orders or enjoying privileges. It's about creating systems that help everyone thrive. As Junior left his father's office, he felt like he had learned more about leadership in the past 3 days than in all his formal lessons combined. He had discovered that being a prince meant more than understanding protocol and diplomacy. It meant paying attention to the real needs of real people and finding ways to address those needs effectively and respectfully. 2 hours later, Junior was walking through the East Wing when he heard voices coming from Captain Rodriguez's office. Through the open door, he could see Thomas sitting across from the captain, and both men were smiling. Junior slowed his pace, hoping to catch a glimpse of Thomas's reaction to the news about the Emergency Assistance Fund. I can't believe this is real, Thomas was saying, his voice filled with emotion. You're telling me that the palace will provide the full amount needed for my mother's surgery, and I can pay it back over 2 years with no interest? Captain Rodriguez nodded, clearly pleased to be delivering such good news. That's exactly right, Thomas. This is a new employee assistance program that the royal family has just approved. You're the first recipient, but it will be available to other staff members who face similar emergencies. Junior saw Thomas put his head in his hands, and for a moment he worried that the guard was upset. But when Thomas looked up, Junior could see tears of relief and gratitude in his eyes. Captain, I've been so worried about my mother. I haven't been sleeping well, and I know my work has suffered because I can't stop thinking about her situation. This changes everything. The best part, Rodriguez continued, is that the fund also includes provisions for emergency leave. You can take 3 days off immediately to be with your mother during her surgery, and it won't count against your regular vacation time. We'll cover your shifts with temporary personnel. Thomas stood up quickly and shook the captain's hand vigorously. Thank you, Captain Rodriguez. Thank you so much. I don't know how to express how much this means to me and my family. Junior stepped back from the doorway, not wanting to intrude on this private moment, but feeling deeply satisfied that his plan had worked. As he walked away, he could hear Thomas asking Rodriguez, how did the royal family know that employees might need this kind of assistance? Did someone suggest that they create this program? Rodriguez's response made Junior smile. I think the royal family is always looking for ways to better support the people who serve the kingdom. Prince Junior, in particular, has been spending time learning about palace operations lately. Maybe his observations helped them realize that this kind of program was needed. That evening, Junior joined his parents for dinner again, and this time his mood was much brighter. I heard that the first employee received assistance from the emergency fund today, he mentioned casually. Queen Isabella smiled. Yes, Captain Rodriguez called to update us. He said the guard was overwhelmed with gratitude and relief. Apparently, the man's mother can have her surgery next week, and he'll be able to be there with her. Rodriguez also mentioned something interesting, King Alexander added. He said this experience made him realize how little he actually knew about his staff's personal challenges. He's planning to implement regular check-ins with all guards, not to pry into their private lives, but to make sure they know that help is available if they need it. Junior felt proud that the Emergency Assistance Fund was already creating positive changes beyond just helping Thomas. "Do you think other departments in the palace might benefit from similar programs?" he asked. Queen Isabella nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that. The kitchen staff, housekeeping, maintenance workers, they all face the same kinds of personal challenges that guards do. Maybe we should expand this program palace-wide." Over the next few days, Junior continued his morning walks through different parts of the palace, but now he had a new purpose. Instead of just observing, he was actively listening for signs that other employees might be struggling with personal problems that affected their work. He discovered that the Emergency Assistance Fund had already become a topic of conversation among the staff. In the kitchen, Junior overheard Cook Maria telling her assistant, "Did you hear about the new program for employees who have family emergencies?" One of the guards was able to get help paying for his mother's surgery. The assistant cook looked interested. "Really? I didn't know the palace offered that kind of assistance. My husband has been out of work for 3 months, and we've been struggling to pay rent." Junior made a mental note to suggest that Captain Rodriguez speak with the kitchen supervisor about employees who might benefit from the fund. He was beginning to understand that financial stress affected workers throughout the palace, not just in the security department. In the housekeeping department, Junior noticed that several staff members seemed tired and distracted. When he asked the housekeeping supervisor about staff morale, she mentioned that 2 employees had been working second jobs in the evenings to support their families. "They're dedicated workers," the supervisor explained, "but I can see that working 60 hours a week is wearing them down." Junior realized that the palace's standard salary might not be sufficient for employees who had large families or unexpected expenses. The Emergency Assistance Fund could help with crises, but maybe the palace also needed to review its overall compensation policies to ensure that full-time employees could support their families without taking second jobs. A week after Thomas received assistance from the fund, Junior encountered the guard in the main palace corridor. Thomas immediately stopped and saluted, but his demeanor was completely different from their first conversation. His eyes were bright, his posture was confident, and he seemed genuinely happy. "Your Highness, I wanted to thank you," Thomas said. Junior looked confused. "Thank me for what, Thomas?" Thomas smiled. "I know you've been walking through the security area regularly, and Captain Rodriguez mentioned that your observations helped the royal family understand the need for employee assistance programs. My mother's surgery was successful and she's recovering well. I was able to be with her during the operation, which meant everything to both of us." Junior felt a warm feeling of satisfaction, but he also felt slightly embarrassed by Thomas's gratitude. "I'm glad the program was helpful, Thomas, but Captain Rodriguez deserves the credit for identifying employees who needed assistance." Thomas nodded. "He told me that too, but I think it takes leadership from the royal family to create programs like this. Not every kingdom cares about the personal welfare of its employees. How are things going for you now?" Junior asked. Thomas's smile widened. "Much better, Your Highness. I can actually concentrate on my work now that I'm not constantly worried about my mother. I feel like I'm finally able to be the kind of guard that the royal family deserves, and knowing that the palace has programs to help employees during emergencies makes me feel more secure about my future here." As Junior continued his walk, he reflected on what Thomas had said about feeling secure about his future. Junior realized that the Emergency Assistance Fund had done more than just help one guard pay for his mother's surgery. It had demonstrated to all palace employees that the royal family cared about their welfare and was willing to provide support during difficult times. This sense of security and support would likely improve job performance, reduce employee turnover, and create stronger loyalty throughout the palace staff. Junior was beginning to understand that good leadership created positive cycles where taking care of employees resulted in better service, which ultimately benefited everyone in the organization. 3 weeks after implementing the Emergency Assistance Fund, Junior noticed significant changes throughout the palace. Staff members seemed more relaxed and focused on their work. There was increased conversation and cooperation between different departments. Most importantly, Several employees had approached their supervisors about personal challenges, knowing that help might be available if needed. Junior decided it was time to expand his morning walks beyond just observing. He began scheduling informal meetings with department supervisors to discuss employee welfare and gather suggestions for additional support programs. His first meeting was with Mrs. Henderson, the head of housekeeping, who had worked at the palace for over 20 years. Mrs. Henderson, "I've been thinking about ways the palace can better support all our employees," Junior began. "You know the housekeeping staff better than anyone. What kinds of challenges do they face that might affect their ability to do their best work?" Mrs. Henderson looked surprised by the question, but also pleased that the prince was asking for her input. "Well, Your Highness, I think the emergency fund is wonderful, but there are other issues that affect our staff regularly," she said thoughtfully. "Many of our employees have children, and finding reliable childcare can be very difficult. Some of our best workers have had to quit because they couldn't find safe, affordable places for their children during work hours." Junior made notes as Mrs. Henderson continued. "Also, transportation can be a problem. Several employees don't have cars, and the bus service to the palace is limited. Sometimes people are late or miss work entirely because of transportation issues, even though they're very dedicated employees." "What about professional development?" Junior asked. "Do housekeeping staff have opportunities to learn new skills or advance to higher positions?" Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "Not really, Your Highness. We provide basic job training, but there aren't formal programs to help people advance their careers. Some of our employees have been in the same positions for many years, not because they lack ambition, but because they don't know how to develop new skills." Junior's next meeting was with Chef Carlos, who supervised the kitchen staff. Chef Carlos had different concerns but similar themes. "The biggest challenge for kitchen workers is the physical demands of the job," he explained. "We're on our feet for 8 to 10 hours a day, and many employees develop back problems or joint pain over time. We don't have good programs for preventing workplace injuries or helping people recover when they do get hurt. We also lose good employees because they can't afford to take time off when they're sick," Chef Carlos continued. "They come to work even when they're not feeling well because they need the income. But then they don't recover properly, and sometimes they make other people sick too." Junior realized that the palace's employee benefits, while generous by local standards, didn't address many of the real challenges that working people faced. The Emergency Assistance Fund was a good start, but comprehensive employee welfare required addressing everyday issues like healthcare, childcare, transportation, and career development. That evening, Junior presented his findings to his parents. "I think we need to look at employee welfare as a complete system," he explained, "not just emergency assistance." He outlined the various challenges that department supervisors had identified and suggested that the palace could become a model employer by addressing these issues comprehensively. King Alexander listened carefully to his son's report. "These are significant undertakings, Junior. Implementing childcare assistance, transportation programs, and career development initiatives would require substantial investment and careful planning." But the king's tone suggested he was interested, rather than dismissive. Queen Isabella added, "However, these investments would likely pay for themselves over time, through reduced employee turnover, improved productivity, and stronger loyalty to the royal family." She smiled at her son. "Junior, you're thinking like a true leader now. You're not just solving individual problems. You're creating systems that prevent problems from occurring." Junior felt encouraged by his parents' response, but he also felt the weight of responsibility. "I know these changes would be expensive and complicated to implement," he said. "But I keep thinking about Thomas and how much his personal stress was affecting his ability to work effectively. If we can prevent that kind of stress for other employees, everyone benefits." Over the next month, Junior worked with his parents and various department heads to develop a comprehensive employee welfare program. They created childcare assistance for employees with children under 12. They established a transportation program that provided van service from nearby villages during morning and evening shifts. They developed partnerships with local colleges to offer continuing education opportunities for palace employees who wanted to advance their careers. Most importantly, they created a formal system for employees to discuss personal challenges with their supervisors without fear of negative consequences. Each department would have regular welfare check-ins where employees could request assistance. suggest improvements, or simply share concerns about workplace conditions. The program was expensive, requiring a significant increase in the palace's annual budget. But King Alexander decided that this investment was consistent with the royal family's values and responsibilities. "If we expect people to dedicate their careers to serving our family," he told Junior, "then we have an obligation to ensure that their service doesn't require personal sacrifice or hardship." Junior was amazed by how quickly the new programs were embraced by palace employees. Within 6 weeks, 12 families were receiving childcare assistance, 23 employees were using the transportation service, and 8 staff members had enrolled in continuing education programs. The employee satisfaction surveys that Captain Rodriguez implemented showed dramatic improvements in morale, job security, and overall happiness. But the most meaningful feedback came from individual conversations. Guard Martinez told Junior that the transportation service allowed him to move his family to a safer neighborhood because he no longer needed to live within walking distance of the palace. Cook Susan mentioned that the child care assistance meant she could finally focus completely on her work instead of worrying about her young daughter. Maintenance worker James shared that the continuing education program was helping him develop skills that would allow him to advance to a supervisory position. Junior realized that these programs had accomplished something beyond just solving practical problems. They had demonstrated to every palace employee that the royal family viewed them as complete human beings with families, aspirations, and challenges, rather than just workers who performed specific tasks. This recognition had created a sense of dignity and respect that was transforming the entire palace culture. During one of his morning walks, Junior encountered Thomas again. The guard looked healthier and happier than Junior had ever seen him. "Your Highness, I wanted you to know that my mother is fully recovered from her surgery," Thomas reported. "But more than that, I feel like working here has become a true career rather than just a job. The professional development opportunities you've created are helping me learn new skills that will benefit both my family and my service to the royal household." Junior felt proud of what they had accomplished, but he also felt humbled by the trust that employees like Thomas had placed in the royal family's leadership. These programs would need to be maintained and improved continuously to live up to that trust. The real test of leadership, Junior realized, was not creating good programs, but ensuring that those programs continued to serve people effectively for years to come. 6 months after implementing the comprehensive employee welfare programs, Junior's morning walks through the palace had become legendary among the staff. Employees would prepare for weeks when they heard the prince might visit their department, not out of fear, but out of excitement to share their experiences and suggestions with someone who genuinely listened and cared about their welfare. The transformation in palace culture was remarkable. Employee turnover had dropped to almost zero. Productivity had increased significantly across all departments. Most importantly, there was a sense of pride and ownership among the staff that had never existed before. Workers took initiative to solve problems, collaborated more effectively between departments, and consistently went above and beyond their basic job requirements. Junior had learned something profound about leadership through this experience. He discovered that the most effective way to improve performance was not through stricter rules or higher expectations, but through creating conditions where people could thrive personally and professionally. When employees felt secure, respected, and supported, they naturally performed at their highest level. The success of the palace employee welfare programs had attracted attention from other kingdoms and organizations. Delegations regularly visited to study how the programs worked and to implement similar systems in their own institutions. Junior found himself becoming a spokesperson for compassionate leadership, sharing his experiences with visiting dignitaries and through written reports that were distributed to other royal families. During one such presentation to a delegation from a neighboring kingdom, Junior explained his core philosophy. Leadership is not about commanding people to serve you. It's about creating systems that allow people to serve something larger than themselves, while also pursuing their own happiness and growth. When those two goals align, everyone benefits. The visiting delegation was particularly interested in the practical details of implementation. "How do you maintain these programs financially?" asked one delegate. "Doesn't providing extensive employee benefits create unsustainable costs?" Junior had anticipated this question and had prepared detailed financial analyses with his Father's economic advisors. The programs pay for themselves through improved efficiency and reduced turnover costs, Junior explained. When employees stay in their positions longer, we save money on recruiting and training. When they're healthier and less stressed, they take fewer sick days and work more productively. When they feel invested in the organization's success, they find ways to improve operations that save money and time. But beyond the financial benefits, Junior emphasized the moral importance of the programs. These employees dedicate their careers to serving our family and our kingdom. We have a responsibility to ensure that their service enhances their lives, rather than requiring them to sacrifice their personal welfare. This isn't just good business. It's the right thing to do. After the delegation left, Junior reflected on how much his understanding of leadership had evolved since that first morning, when he overheard Thomas struggling with his mother's medical crisis. He had initially thought that being a good prince meant learning protocol, diplomacy, and royal traditions. Now he understood that true leadership meant developing systems that helped people flourish. Junior's morning walks had also evolved. Instead of just observing palace operations, he now used these walks to maintain ongoing relationships with employees at all levels. He knew the names of security guards' children, asked about housekeepers' educational goals, and remembered kitchen staff's family celebrations. These weren't superficial gestures. They reflected Junior's genuine interest in the people who made palace life possible. Thomas had become something of a case study for the success of the employee welfare programs. His mother had made a complete recovery, and Thomas had been promoted to a senior security position based on additional training he received through the professional development program. More importantly, Thomas had become an advocate for other employees, helping to identify colleagues who might benefit from various assistance programs. "Your Highness," Thomas told Junior during one of their regular conversations, "you saved my mother's life, but you did something even more important. You showed all of us that our personal welfare matters to the royal family. That knowledge changes how we approach our work every single day." Junior was moved by Thomas's words, but he also felt the weight of ongoing responsibility. Thomas maintaining these programs and continuously improving them is just as important as creating them. "I need you and other employees to keep telling me when things aren't working or when new needs emerge." The employee welfare programs had become a central part of Junior's preparation for eventual kingship. King Alexander regularly involved his son in discussions about palace administration, kingdom finances, and diplomatic relations. But he always emphasized that Junior's insights about employee welfare were among his most valuable contributions to royal leadership. "Junior, you've learned something that many leaders never understand," the king told his son during one of their weekly meetings. "The strength of any organization comes from the people who do the everyday work. If you take care of those people, they will accomplish things that no amount of money or technology could achieve." Queen Isabella added, "More importantly, you've learned that leadership is about service, not privilege. A true leader serves the people who serve the kingdom. That understanding will make you a better king than any amount of formal education could provide." As Junior continued his development as a future leader, he maintained his morning walks and his commitment to employee welfare. But he also began thinking about how these principles could be applied beyond the palace walls. Could similar programs help farmers, merchants, teachers, and other citizens throughout the kingdom? Could compassionate leadership principles be applied to international relations and diplomatic negotiations? Junior realized that his experience with Thomas and the palace employee welfare programs had given him a framework for leadership that could guide him throughout his reign as king. The principles were simple but powerful. Pay attention to people's real needs. Create systems that address those needs effectively, and continuously improve those systems based on ongoing feedback and changing circumstances. Years later, when Junior became King Junior I, historians would trace many of his most successful policies back to those early morning walks through the palace corridors. They would note that his approach to governance was fundamentally shaped by his understanding that true leadership meant creating conditions where all people could thrive while serving something larger than themselves. But Junior would always remember that this understanding began with one simple observation: a young guard sitting alone in a security office, struggling to balance his professional duties with his desperate desire to save his mother's life. That moment had taught Junior that effective leadership starts with seeing people as complete human beings and then building systems that honor that humanity while achieving common goals. The employee welfare programs continued long after Junior became king, serving as a model not just for the palace, but for organizations throughout the kingdom and beyond. They stood as a testament to the truth that compassionate leadership creates stronger institutions, happier people, and more prosperous societies for everyone involved.